For our series of webinars starting today until next month, we are fortunate and blessed to be able to partner with no less than the leader in distance learning in the country, the University of the Philippines Open University. UPOU has been doing distance learning for 25 years now, and those who will participate in this session and the 6 other sessions will no doubt learn from the experts. Let me now take this opportunity to introduce our resource person for this first webinar on teaching and learning in the time of COVID-19, options, directions, and challenges. She's actually a very good friend of mine, and we have been working together for over 15 years, not just in championing the use of ICT in rural communities through the community e-centers and Tech for Ed centers, but in the global telecenter community as well, with Dr. Mel being one of the prime movers of the then Global Telecenter Academy. She is president of the Philippine Community E-Center Network for many years now. We don't want her to leave that post. President of Asian Association of Open Universities in 2017-2019, chair of the massive Open Online Course Steering Committee from 2016 to the present, and she has numerous awards and recognitions under her belt, but I would just like to mention a few. She is a recipient of the second Gawad Pangulo for Excellence in Public Service in 2017, an Outstanding Alumni Award of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños in 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome our resource person, the Chancellor and Professor of University of the Philippines Open University, Dr. Melinda Dela Peña Bandalaria. Over to you, Dr. Mel.
Yes, hello Tess, and good morning everyone. So I greet everyone, our webinar participants. Good morning, buenos dias a todos. That's the limit of my Spanish, which I think I can say to you. It is also my pleasure to join you in this celebration of the ICT month. I greet everyone also the happy ICT month, and let's all be together in our celebration and really making ICT work so that we can adjust to the new normal. Of course, I would like to thank our colleagues at the ICT Mindanao cluster for this opportunity to reach the other sectors, other groups through this webinar series in the things that we are advocating, and that is helping the education sector transition to the remote teaching and learning. I think that's the direction that we are all looking into now, and something that will really help us so that we can ensure that learning will continue. So if I may share my screen now, I will proceed to my presentation. This is it. So as mentioned, that's what has been mentioned earlier, I'm going to share in this morning session the topic teaching and learning in the time of COVID-19. Options, directions, and challenges. Of course, there's so many things that we are hearing. How are we going to prepare ourselves, etc., etc. But how are we exactly going to move forward? What are the things that we need to do, the concrete things that we need to do? First, as a teacher, and then probably some of you are university officials, school officials, administrators. So how exactly are we going to concretize the different directions or directives and issuances from DepEd, from CHED, from TESDA? So are we going to concretize all of them, given that they are generic or general directives or issuances? So as introduced, I am Dr. Mel Bandalaria. I am professor and currently the Chancellor of the University of the Philippines Open University. So first, let me give you a short background about my institution. So it is very important that you also get to know the institution that I am representing, because what I am bringing to this conversation this morning is the experience that I have acquired from working with the UP Open University for almost 25 years now. So yes, we are based in Los Baños. This is our administration building. Those of you who haven't yet gone to our headquarters, yes, we are an open university, but we do have a physical office like this one in Los Baños. So we are one of the constituent units of the University of the Philippines system. And as we know, UP is the only national university in the country. That's why we are also doing all these things, because it is our mandate as the national university to be helping the education sector as we face and adjust to this pandemic that is affecting all of us. So we were established in 1995, and we were mandated basically to democratize access to quality higher education through distance education. So as you can see right from the start, our mode of instruction is distance education. We don't see our students, they don't see us, which I think is also fortunate, but there is an emphasis to the word quality and democratizing access. That means to say that wherever you are, you will be given the chance or the opportunity to study at the University of the Philippines system through the UP Open University. So we were established in 1995, but we started doing e-learning or integrating modern information and communication technologies in 2001. And we became fully online in 2007. So because of that, many of our students, like 24% of our student population, are located outside the country. There are about or more than 70 countries where our students are coming from. We started implementing massive open online courses. That's really the free courses in 2013. And in 2014, in December 2014, the Republic Act 10650, which is the Open Distance Learning Act, was signed and implemented. And in this law, we were mandated to assist higher education institutions and technical vocational institutions so that they can also offer their programs in distance education mode. That way, there will be more opportunities for our learners to participate in the learning environment, be it in higher education or in technical vocational education. It was mentioned earlier by Tess, my very good friend Tess, that the Philippines was president of the Asian Association of Open Universities for the term 2017-2019. And this association has more than 60 open universities as members. So through that association also, we learned a lot in terms of implementing online programs, the technologies that we are using, the different strategies. Again, that learning is something that we are bringing into this conversation. We are an active member of the International Council on Open and Distance Education. We are also a founding member of the consortium on benchmarking framework and data set. It's all about the quality in open online learning, spearheaded by a university based in Dubai. And we are also an active member and work group leader of UNESCO's OER Dynamic Coalition. So these are the things that where UP Open University is busy with, and which provided us with many insights and theorizing practices, etc. So that we can improve the practice of online teaching and learning here in our country, in the Philippines, as well as influence the same in the whole of Asia. So these are the programs that we are offering. We have 3 undergraduate programs. We have 26 graduate diploma and master programs, 2 doctoral programs, and we are offering more than 70 massive open online courses, as well as a number of non-degree and non-formal courses. Note that all these programs and courses are offered 100% online. So, we can see that a number of students, this number of programs, all our students are interacting with us through the internet or the online mode of instruction. Okay, so during the past recent years, and I think you will agree with me, that talks at the education sector centered on the 4th Industrial Revolution. So even I, during the past 2-3 years, my talk would always center on fourth industrial revolution, which is characterized by the fusion of advances in artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, 3D printing, genetic engineering, quantum computing, name it, and their convergence, so that we can make things easier for people. But these discussions came to a halt during the early part of the year. So instead of talking about these things, instead of talking about the Internet of Things, instead of talking about flying cars, we suddenly found ourselves teaching our people how to wash their hands. It's ironic because in the middle of talks of modern information and communication technologies, this artificial intelligence, we suddenly go back to the basic in order to survive. So now survival is the main thing that occupies our mind. And we have become more attuned to the news that is happening, especially on the number of cases or confirmed cases of COVID-19, the number of deaths, and the number of recoveries, simply because these numbers are affecting our lives and affecting what would be the next so many weeks or months, or even what will be the rest of 2020 will be. So we are all now attuned to these numbers, and we many of us really became more aware of how we are progressing in terms of our battle against the COVID-19 pandemic. So as we know, last March, many areas in the country were put under total lockdown, and many were caught unprepared, including us at the education sector. We were surprised. We were not able to react immediately. We just said, okay, classes canceled, and that's it. That period was described as unprecedented learning crisis because we were not able to predict it. And but we know that that kind of crisis needs to be addressed immediately, because our bottom line is learning should continue. Wherever it will happen, it should continue. So it was estimated that about 90% of the world's student population were affected by the closure of schools due to this COVID-19 pandemic. So you can just imagine, this is a worldwide thing. It is not just the Philippines. So I always tell our colleagues at the education sector, let's not be too hard on ourselves, because we are not alone here. We are all struggling. We are all trying to cope with this disruption. But the thing is, we should be open to sharing our experiences. We should be open to sharing our strategies so that we can help one another in coping with this disruption. So schools all over the world, as I had mentioned, including the big and renowned universities, were really scrambling to cope with these disruptions. The direction was to go online. So lagi nating naririnig yan, go online. And this has become also the direction for the Philippines at that time. So at that time, maririnig natin, o sige, online tayo, online, ganyan. Kasi parang yun na yung pinakamabilis na maiisip natin so that we can respond to the closing of schools and the cancellation of classes. So these are the things that flood our newsfeed at that time. It was in no way different from the rest of the world. And there were efforts to cope with the disruption, which became our main goal. Second, to prioritizing the health and safety of everyone. Okay. So ito naman, lumabas na ito very recently, we continue to prepare for the opening of classes. Several directives and pronouncements were made, such as these ones. Minsan, there was a point na ano ba talagang gagawin natin? Shall we proceed with the opening of classes as scheduled? So maraming mga announcements. And again, let's not put blame to these people or to the officials who are handling the different levels of education in the country. Because as we know, situation change, or they keep on changing. And we really need to adjust. And we just have to be assured that our primary consideration is keeping our students and our teachers safe. So So ang lagi kong sinasabi pagka if people are asking me, bakit ganon? Why can't we make a firm decision? Sabi ko, it's because situations are changing, and what we really want to give is simply the best for our students. So let's try to be more understanding of the situation, and we don't want really to make lives more difficult for our students. So yan, makikita natin yan in our news feeds. So ito din, yung mga pronouncements galing from DepEd. Sabi nila, all the DepEd Secretary, our call remains the same. Education must continue, whether face-to-face or virtual, with or without physically going to school. And recently, DepEd Secretary Yusek Nepma Laluan pronounced that the opening of school year 2020-2021 does not necessarily mean that the students will be coming to school. So at least meron ng ganun definite na instructions or pronouncement. On the part of higher ed, CHED specifically mentioned the flexible learning options, which may involve digital and non-digital technology and does not necessarily require internet connectivity. So alam naman natin yan na hindi naman lahat talaga ay may internet sa Pilipinas. I will be discussing this in length later. So this was in response to the still prevailing condition of digital exclusion. For Tibet, the direction is the same. I happen to be invited to be part of the technical working group, which discussed the draft of the policy guidelines for technical vocational education. And the offline and online mode of instruction was specifically mentioned as something that should be considered as the mode of teaching and learning in the time of COVID-19 pandemic. So if we are going to look at the different pronouncements from TESDA, from DepEd, from CHED, merong unifying factor. May unifying factor, and that unifying factor will now determine what will now be the mode of instruction when classes open in the next school year. So let's see here, specifically, CHED, DepEd, and TESDA issued advisories. Specific to CHED, there are a total of 7 advisories related to COVID-19. And the more recent ones would provide more specific instructions how universities would go about with the opening of classes, like OJT, internship, etc. So that will be for DepEd. CHED, DepEd has provided a summary of its issuances as shown in the slide, while TESDA has issued circular number 062 series of 2020, which spells out the guidelines of implementing flexible learning in Tibet. So we're not short of guidance and guidelines coming from DepEd, from CHED, and TESDA. But again, given these issuances, the questions remain. How shall we prepare for the opening of classes? What options do we have? What exactly is flexible teaching and learning, which has been the directive of the Commission on Higher Education? How shall we concretize it? What challenges should we prepare for? And where should all these preparations bring us post-COVID-19 pandemic? Of course, we are all hoping that this pandemic would end soon. Hopefully, after when this year ends, the pandemic will also end with the availability of the vaccine. So what the things that we are doing now, are we doing it just because of the pandemic? How shall we bring it forward? Is there something like a returning to the old normal? Is this something that we want? So those are the questions that we would like to ask and to pose to our colleagues at the education sector. So first, let's take a look at the education system that we have before the COVID-19. So note that this kind of education system is not only for the Philippines, but this is the prevailing education system worldwide. What we have is an education system which requires the physical presence of both the teachers and the students in the same place at the same time. So this is what we know as the classroom teaching. And this kind of teaching or education system automatically excludes some students, like those who are physically challenged and are facing constraints which prevent them from being part of this conventional mode of instruction. So paano kung hindi makapasok? Paano kung hindi makapunta sa eskwelahan? Paano kung may mga rason at hindi siya makaparticipate in the conventional mode of instruction? So that's the prevailing education system that we have. This mode of instruction also cannot respond easily to circumstances that force closure, whether this is due to a conflict, just like what we experienced in Marawi, floods or typhoons, which we often experience. Alam na alam natin, magkabaha lang ng konti, lalo sa Manila, cancel ng lahat ng klase. Fires or some other disasters like the Taal volcano eruption, which we experience here during the early part of the year. And pandemic, like the one that we are battling right now. So as we had mentioned, in March, we have witnessed, and probably many of us experienced, this rush to shift to online learning, because that's what uppermost in our mind. We go online because this is emergency. We have to complete the school year. We have to complete the semester. We have to note that when this happened in March, many of our classes have not yet ended. So our thinking was how we can end the semester, how we can end the school year. So there was this sudden rush to online teaching and what was then called as the remote or emergency remote teaching. So if we look at the definition, remote learning is an emergency measure. So it's an emergency measure which attempts to replicate the classroom teaching and learning process in an online mode. So it is given. It will be online. It is an emergency measure, but this can be considered a form of distance education. So because it shares the basic characteristics of the separation of the teacher and the students in time and space. Our students are not with us. They are remotely. We are teaching with our students in some other places, not in the classroom. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. The kind of teaching and learning that we will have to do when the class opens sometime August or September. So moving instruction online can enable the flexibility of teaching and learning anywhere, anytime. But the speed with which this move to online instruction is expected to happen is or was unprecedented and staggering. Yung sinabi ko nga kanina, we were all caught unaware, or we were all surprised. So it was a description was given. Faculty felt like instructional MacGyvers. I think yung mga ka-age ko dito, mga ka-henerasyon ko dito, I think you can still know MacGyver, having to improvise quick solutions in less than ideal circumstances. We have to make do with whatever is available, with what we know, the basic knowledge that we know about things, and the available resources. So that's what happened with this sudden shift to online learning. So no matter how clever a solution might be, so yun yung binibigay sa atin ni MacGyver during that time, it's a clever solution. And truthfully, there are clever solutions that emerge. Many instructors still felt that they were stressed. There was this anxiety. Are they doing the right thing? Are they delivering quality instruction to their students? So again, we thought that this is the fastest way, being online. In fact, a professor friend from Indiana University, Professor Curtis Bonk, described this sudden shift as forcing teachers to be at level 4 of online instruction. When in fact, just like the rest of us at UP Open University, we have to go through levels 1, 2, 3 before we reach the level 4. But now, teachers were forced to be at the level 4 of teaching online because of these things that are happening. This remote teaching and learning, again, implies that there is an online component to the kind of teaching that, that we will be doing. However, we have to note that given the uneven development of technologies in various countries, Philippines is not an exemption, online learning cannot be seen as the only solution for remote, rural, and resource-poor communities. We are all aware of that, especially those participants in the webinar session, this webinar session, who are part of our Tech for Ed centers. We know the struggle, we know the challenges. And even as we try to address all these challenges, still we can find areas and sectors in the country that remain not connected to the internet. Hence, the need to consider other flexible models of delivering instruction. Sabi natin, hindi pwedeng may maiwan. Everyone should be included in this shift to remote teaching and learning. So what are our options? So let's take a look at one of them, or many of them. One of the features of learning delivery mode that would be responsive to disruptions, just like what's happening now, it should be flexible. There is flexibility in the kind of teaching and learning that we should be doing. And this is also the reason why, specific for CHED, their directive is for universities to go flexible learning. Flexible learning, but that is not a mode of instruction. Ano? When we look at flexibility, when we talk of flexibility in learning delivery, we can look at it as a function of the integration or level of integration of modern ICTs. That's why we present this, this graph, that the higher the level of ICT integration, then the higher will be the flexibility in our mode of instruction. So as illustrated, face-to-face instruction, or what we know as the classroom teaching and learning, has the lowest level of technology integration, and as such, the least flexible among the modes of instructional delivery. Although in most cases, there are already technologies or e-technologies that are being integrated into the classroom teaching. But the mere fact that we are requiring a face-to-face instruction in the classroom makes this mode of teaching less flexible. So when we go to the next level, it's the blended teaching and learning, which is commonly defined as the online, offline, and there is a greater integration of modern technologies to the teaching and learning process. So this is the next level of flexibility. So we can, many of us are familiar with this mode of instruction, especially the flipped classroom. So those teachers who are with us, I think many of you are familiar with this blended or flipped classroom. So that's the next level of flexibility, because in a way, we are giving our students some time off outside the classroom. And that now provides a certain level of flexibility to our mode of instruction. A bigger or higher level of flexibility can be seen in a full distance education mode. So let us focus here, because this will now be, I think for majority of us, will be the mode of instruction during the school, the next school year. So there are different terminologies associated with distance education as listed here, and we will be discussing them one by one. We look at open and distance e-learning, that's ODEL, as the most flexible and with the highest level of technology integration. I will be defining these terms later so that we can better understand what kind of combination can we do so that we can deliver the instruction to our students. So let's first take a look. What is flexible learning? Okay, so first, a flexible learning is a continuum of approaches in terms of time, place, pace, content, and mode of learning applied in varying degrees, with the general purpose of first, increasing opportunities and options available to our learners. Again, we always have to think of our learners. It's useless to think that the teachers will have access to the internet when our students don't have. So we always have to think, what is the context of my learners? So we have to give them options. We have to give them the flexibility, greater control over their learning through a variety of learning modes and interactions. So ibibigay natin yung sa kanila. We also have to note that flexible learning is not an alternative mode by itself. Again, hindi siya. Pag sinabi mong flexible learning, it's not yet concrete. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng flexible learning na yan? It's not a mode of instruction. We still need to concretize it. And we have to note also and look at the different dimensions of flexible learning. So these are flexibility in time, which means to say that we have a range of when can the student start or finish the course. But in the context of the formal education system, we have an academic calendar that we need to consider so that the start of the course and the end of the course are determined by our academic calendar. So where is flexibility there? The flexibility is in terms of when the student will be interacting with the content, will be studying the lesson. So andun yung flexibility. Sabay-sabay silang magsisimula sa klase, mag-e-end ng klase, pero it's no longer like what we do in the classroom, wherein the time where when the student would be interacting with the content, interacting with the teacher, interacting with the learner, will be fixed. Yun lang yung class hour lang. Dito sa flexible learning, binibigyan natin, we give our students the elbow room. Kung gusto mong mag-aral mamayang gabi, di mamayang gabi ka mag-aral kasi yun yung time mo. Especially now, during this COVID-19, it is highly probable that our students would be saddled by other responsibilities. Gaalaga ng mga kapamilya, baka siya yung runner ng family niya kasi matatanda na yung mga kasama sa bahay. And therefore, under normal circumstances, hindi sila makakapag-aral ng lesson nila. They would have to wait for a more convenient time. It could be in the evening, it could be in the wee hours of the morning, and we give it to them, that kind of flexibility in terms of time to engage in studying the lesson. So that's for the time. The other flexibility is in terms of the requirements. Entry requirements, again, this may not be applicable to us because what we are looking at now is a formal education system. In this aspect, we have a fixed requirement, but I can cite as an example of wherein flexibility does not require entry requirements are the massive open online courses or MOOCs. I have mentioned MOOCs in my introduction of the university, and in addition, there are many massive open online courses that we can find in the internet. I mean, during our free time, we can also search for them and find some topics that could be of interest to us. So like, for instance, those courses offered by Coursera, edX, or even UPOU, as I mentioned earlier. So anyone who is interested to learn, courses are free. So this is an example wherein we are flexible when it comes to the entry requirement. The flexibility in instructional approach and resources, this is where the teacher can consider different options with the learning objectives as major consideration. So where are we going to get our instructional resources? Are we going to give them what we are doing or what we are using in the conventional, in the classroom teaching? So we have PowerPoints, we have handouts, we have reading materials. Are we going to give it to them? Or are we going to look at the internet for some relevant and updated materials? So in the flexible learning option, specifically in online mode of instruction, the teacher is given the flexibility to get the resources to be given to the students. So mas magiging malawak, hindi lang yung ibinibigay ng teacher, not just from the instructor or the teacher, but also from the internet. And we know that there are so many resources which we can use for our teaching and learning. When it comes to the delivery, of course, as I mentioned earlier, much of the instruction that we will be doing will be through distance or remotely. There may be instances, I'm not so sure, probably at the higher education level or at the technical vocational education, that the face-to-face may be necessary. But of course, with the primary consideration of the health and well-being of our students and teachers. So we have to take note of that as well. So we note these different flexibilities because as we plan our instruction, we may need to get or use these different dimensions of flexibility in the design of our courses. Paano ba natin i-design yung mga kurso natin? I am handling history, for instance. I am handling an English course. I am handling a technology course. So how am I going to design my course considering the limitations that we have now? So tingnan natin itong mga flexibilities na to kasi it may be that at one point of our teaching, gagamitin natin itong flexibility na to. Okay, so let's try to understand the concepts. Because in understanding the concept, we may be able to do that combination in designing our courses. So we are all familiar with the face-to-face instruction. Diba? Yung nasa classroom tayo. This is the learning environment where the students and the teachers are both physically present in the classroom. Many, if not all of us, had been through this kind of instruction. Nakapag-aral tayo, natapos tayo with the classroom instruction, which is the most familiar to many of us. I would like, the picture that I am also showing in this slide is one of my favorite pictures, just so that I can emphasize the role of technology. The role of technology in teaching and learning. This is a picture, of course, showing how hundreds of years ago, how teaching without the technology and only the teacher in front of the classroom giving instruction. Makita natin, this is still happening now, ha? We cannot say that dahil ang picture ay connotes that it happened 100 of years ago, hindi natin pwedeng sabihin that it's no longer happening now. It is happening now. And those who are teachers here in this webinar session can relate when I say that it is a common sight to see students in our classroom na medyo inaantok, ganyan. Mabuti nga kung inaantok, ano, baka nga mamaya tulog, di ba? So may mga ganon tayong cases, and sometimes even the classroom teachers would opt to use technology to keep the learning session interesting. And that's something that interestingly we are seeing in many of our classrooms now. So that's for the face-to-face. Blended learning, I have mentioned this earlier, and I think, as I mentioned, many of us are already familiar with this mode of instruction. But let's take a look at the definition, because sometimes it's not enough that we hold classes now and then all of a sudden we realize na, ay, hindi pala ako available next week, mag-online na lang ako. That's not blended learning, because as defined, blended learning is a strategic and systematic approach to combining times and modes of learning. So integrating the best aspects of face-to-face and online interaction and using the appropriate ICTs. So we have to note that there is this emphasis on the terms strategic, systematic, because we really want to make the best of the both modes of instruction, online and the classroom instruction. So another definition that I always use when discussing blended learning is it being a formal form, it's a formal education, wherein a student learns at least in part through the online delivery. So yung part of the course will be online, manonood siya ng mga video materials, etc., makiki-interact online with the classmates, ganyan, and with some element of student control over time, place, path. So kung mamaya ako gustong panoorin itong mga video materials na to, mamaya ako ito gagawin, that's still okay. Because I have, in a way, control over that activity, that learning activity. And then part of the course will be in a supervised brick and mortar location. So that's the classroom. So blended learning includes this intentional shift. So makikita natin, ano ba yung mga activities na ipapagawa natin? Online instructional delivery for a portion of the course with the goal of boosting or facilitating learning. So the illustration I included in this slide implies that blended learning should be something like this. It should be a work of art and not just a hodgepodge of online, offline activities at the whim of the teacher. Note the emphasis on boost learning, and if I may also add, quality instruction. So as an additional note for blended learning, and this is something that we will also be bringing, this kind of, these thoughts are something that we will also be bringing to online instruction. So according to this Will Thalheimer, it's not the modality that matters. So classroom ka man, online ka man, blended ka man, it's not that modality that matters. What will matter is the learning method. And that is something that the teacher should design. So kung classroom yan, i-design mo yung learning ng mga estudyante, taking into consideration that the students are with you. But if they are in the distance education mode, then your learning method should take into consideration that your students are not in the classroom. Hence, if designed and developed correctly, blended learning or even online learning can be as good, and if I may say, even better than the traditional or conventional way of teaching and learning. So the key is designing the learning correctly. Of course, we have heard of the apprehensions of some teachers. Ito, very common ito, I'm afraid that the technology will replace my role as a teacher. So laging ganyan yan. And this could be the reason why many teachers are not also keen on using the technology for their teaching. It is that fear that technology will replace them. Baka mawalan sila ng trabaho, ano? It should be noted that technology will not replace great teachers. If you are a good teacher, no amount of modern technology will replace you. Or even trainers, as some of you may want to call yourselves. Technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. So, kung magaling kang teacher, gagamit ka pa ng technology, the whole process can be transformational. Let's note that technology are just tools. And if the teacher is not good, no amount of modern technology can change that. And even if the teacher is just using printed materials, walang access sa technology, ganon. Kasi ganon yung situation ng mga estudyante natin. Walang access sa internet. So printed materials lang ang meron siya. But if the teacher is good, very good, then the teacher can design the learning process using printed materials or whatever technology would be available to the learners, and the learning will still happen. Learning will still happen. So the key here is still the teacher, not the technology. So let's take a look at the other concepts. In here, of course, I have mentioned distance education. As implied by the term, distance education is a mode of instructional delivery whereby the teacher and the learner are separated in time and space, and the instruction is delivered through specifically designed materials. Note that a qualification, especially designed materials and methods, using appropriate technologies and learning management system, and supported by organizational and administrative structures and arrangements. So again, there's the separation in time and space, which is the basic feature of distance education, and which can be considered as the response mechanism in this time of COVID-19 pandemic. Sabi nila, no face-to-face classes. Hanggang walang bakuna, hindi papasok ang mga estudyante. So may ganung pronouncement. Sa higher ed, pwede naman kayo magkaroon ng face-to-face, depende kung ano yung sitwasyon ng inyong lugar. Again, there is the emphasis on specially designed materials and methods, which implies that just uploading your lecture notes online may not be classified under this mode of instruction. Meron kang PowerPoint presentation, in-email mo sa mga estudyante mo, that's not distance education, that's not distance e-learning. So also as discussed earlier, it is the reason why educators use remote teaching and learning. That's also the term that we are using in this series of webinar sessions, instead of just calling it distance education. So we look at remote teaching and learning because that is how this whole process, this whole initiative, this whole event is being called by our colleagues at the education sector. It was forwarded by the DE researchers, practitioners, to really emphasize the difference between the very well-prepared distance education courses, and the remote teaching and learning, which is an attempt to replicate our classroom teaching using the technology. It may be the same technology, but the fact that our aim is to replicate classroom teaching is different from the way we design instructional materials and even structure, institutional structure that will support the distance education mode of instruction. So distance education enables learning to take place from a distance. We have mentioned that virtually and differently from the conventional classroom or the traditional mode of instruction. So what about e-learning? So ito, medyo napaka-familiar na sa atin itong term na e-learning. In general, and during the early years, e-learning can refer to learning that is enabled electronically. So nung unang-unang panahon, that's how we refer to e-learning. That's why e-learning can happen even inside the classroom. And this is also the reason why UPOU came up with the term distance e-learning to really emphasize the role of the technology when we do e-learning inside the classroom and when we do e-learning in distance education. There are somehow differences in the role that technology would play in the teaching and learning processes. Through the years, however, e-learning has become synonymous with online learning. So pag narinig natin ngayon yung e-learning, ang pumapasok na sa isip natin, online learning, which implies the necessity of having access to the internet or the network technologies. So pagka pumasok sa atin yung e-learning institution yan, there is already that common perception that it is online learning. Hence, this definition that e-learning is a new method of education involving technologies that allow the student to complete a course outside of the traditional classroom. And these technologies hinge on the internet and its ability to reach students many miles from a physical school or university. So that's why when UPOU started implementing online learning, we were able to reach many students outside the Philippines. And it's because we maximize the affordances of the modern information and communication technologies. Of course, we have heard of home-based learning and modular instruction. With this disruption in education, I think you also have heard of your friends, colleagues, yung mga nanay dyan, mga parents dyan, who are considering this homeschooling. Nag-iisip na sila, total, ano naman, sa bahay naman mag-aaral, ay di mag-homeschooling na lang ako, yung mga anak ko. But note that in home-based learning or homeschooling, there is this emphasis on the presence of someone qualified to supervise the learning process. So ito yung pagkakaiba niya when we just talk of remote teaching and learning or distance education. So this someone, this qualified someone, can be the parents, the guardians, or a tutor who have undergone relevant training para mas maituro niya yung curriculum from a provider. Mula doon sa provider. So bilhin mo yung curriculum and then ikaw mismo yung magtuturo. Hence, it is very important that the parents or the guardian or the tutor is trained in this mode of instruction. So you buy the whole curriculum. The task of teaching rests on the tutor or the parents, which is the reason why this is a very important requirement for this mode of instruction. So there is no school, so to speak, but many of them in the Philippines are DepEd accredited. In modular instruction, the emphasis is on the kind of instructional materials prepared. So the learner should be completing this module. I think what the common example that we can have here is yung sa teaching languages, wherein you have to complete one module before you can move to the next. So modular instruction po yung term that is usually being used to describe that kind of teaching and learning. Open learning, I have mentioned it, and I would like to introduce these two more concepts to you because this is something that may also be relevant as we move forward in this mode of instruction. So open learning is a philosophy. It's not a mode of instruction by itself, but it is a philosophy which espouses the removal of barriers to learning. So it is quality assured, open to people, methods, places, and ideas, and it is highly flexible, such that it is also learner-centered. It takes into consideration the barriers to learning, which may be being experienced by the individual. So most of the courses under the open learning philosophy, you don't pay a course fee, there's no entry requirement, there's no schedule, so to speak. Kaya nga tawag natin open learning, removing all the barriers. And somehow, in the previous, in the discussion of the Sustainable Development Goals, open learning would always come into the picture because it is inclusive. And Sustainable Development number 4 would always look for inclusivity in learning. So open learning is the way to go when we talk of Sustainable Development Goals. I have here another term, open and distance e-learning, or what we call ODEL. We look at it as the most flexible in terms of delivering instruction. And this concept has been articulated by UPOU in 2012 to describe what we are doing and what we are advocating for. So it represents the convergence of the philosophy of open learning, or removing the barriers to learning, distance education as the mode of instructional delivery, and e-learning, which maximizes the affordances of modern ICTs, specifically the network technology, so that we can deliver instructional content and learner support. Okay, so after knowing all these concepts, what are now our options? How are we going to design our courses as teachers, as school officials, university officials, administrators, trainers? Given all these limitations, how are we now going to design our courses? Of course, we have heard that DepEd recommended 5 learning options under its learning continuity plan. So probably some of you have also been part of the learning continuity plan of DepEd. So we've heard of blended learning, distance learning, homeschooling, apprenticeship is also a part of it, and initially face-to-face, but again, with the recent pronouncements, ang sabi na nga, no vaccine, no face-to-face classes. But then again, learning should continue. Homeschooling and apprenticeship have their specific requirements, as discussed earlier. What deserves further scrutiny are the blended learning and distance learning, which can provide the flexible learning options that we can consider. Note that in the models that I will be discussing, the media format of the instructional materials was the determinant or the major factor considered. And even the level of access to the internet by the students, not the teachers, will be the major consideration. So let's take a look at those different options. So in blended learning, as we can see here, there is still the face-to-face component. Occasional face-to-face session is still being considered. And I think from the higher education sector, ang directive sa atin, kung pupwede na at hindi malalagay sa alanganin ang kalusugan ng ating mga estudyante at ng ating mga guro, at i-observe natin ang physical distancing and other safety measures, then we can go face-to-face, occasional face-to-face. So these are the different models that we can consider if we will design our instruction under the blended learning mode. Note that for each model, there is an equivalent category of student, depending on their level of access to the computer and to the internet. So the first model, face-to-face, face-to-face plus remote. So meron tayong ibibigay sa kanila na non-digital or offline instructional materials. So here, there is the face-to-face, social distancing, and we give our students the printed or the books. I would like to share that in a recent webinar session that I have with CHED Region 6, the regional director emphasized these categories, that teachers should really keep in mind the level of internet access of our students. So as I've mentioned, this is the first model, remote or outside the classroom plus face-to-face, and our materials are non-digital or offline, like the printed materials or books. Under this model, there's also the assumption that the learners do not have access to the internet nor to the computer. Just recently, we have heard also of the use of radio, television instruction, which can also be considered provided these resources are available in your locality. So minsan may mga community radio tayo, then we can enter into a partnership with them so that we can make use of these facilities to give instructional content to our students who don't have access to the internet. So under this mode of instruction, the percentage of face-to-face and remote instruction does not have to be 50-50. In fact, the face-to-face instructions can be scheduled such that only a few students would be reporting and they will be strictly observing social distancing. And the face-to-face session can be the venue or platform to submit class requirements or even to do a sit-down exam na hindi pwedeng gawin kapag walang access sa internet or walang proctor na pwedeng magbantay doon sa mga bata. Again, I would like to share in one webinar session that I was the moderator. There was this sharing by I think the administrator or principal in one school in Cavite. Ang ginawa nila, they made arrangements such that the parents can opt to pick up the books from the school, dalhin sa bahay, mag-aaral doon, gagawin yung mga assignments, and can also submit this materials assignment to the school. So ano yan, walang internet yan. Punta sila doon, pick upin, or the materials can be delivered to them. Sabi niya, when the principal was sharing this strategy, sabi niya, hindi pwedeng may mawala ng trabaho sa eskwelahan ko. Sabi niya ganyan. So, pero kung hindi napapasok yung mga estudyante, ano nang gagawin ng ibang mga school staff na ang kanilang, halimbawa, yung mga assistant ng mga teachers, security guard, janitor, 'di ba? So, maaring may mga gagawin pa rin sila pero hindi ganun kadami compared to when the students are regularly reporting to the school. So, ang ginawa niya, o sige, kayo ang magdi-deliver ng mga libro doon sa mag-o-opt na i-deliver yung mga libro. So hindi sila mawawala ng trabaho. Nag-transform lang or nag-differentiate lang sila ng role. So as school officials, pwede rin natin gawin yung ganong klase ng strategy. Again, the next model is we combine the face-to-face and in designing our materials or translating our materials, they can be the digital but offline. So halimbawa, may mga video materials tayong gagawin at ibibigay natin, especially when we are teaching skills to our students. Pwede nating ilagay sa USB, pwede nating ilagay sa CD, at yun ang ibigay natin sa mga estudyante. That is with the assumption that they have access to a computer. So kanina, si Director Tess mentioned, one of the services that can be provided by the Tech for Ed centers is this access to the computer. Probably not the internet, kung talagang walang access sa internet. But having access to the computer itself will already be a great help to our students when we provide them with these digital materials or digitized materials. Yan. Na doon nila i-access. Kung kailangan nilang manood ng video materials, dala-dala nila yon, papanoorin nila doon. So pwede nating ibigay yon sa kanila. And then of course, there is the model wherein the face-to-face can be combined with offline and online materials. Meron kang libro na ibibigay sa kanila, printed, pero yung academic interaction, discussion, collaboration ay gagawin nila online. And this is where a learning management system is necessary. So may access sa computer at mayroong konting access sa internet. But in some cases, that bandwidth or access to the internet may not be enough to download video materials or watch video materials, download books and other resources kasi limited. Medyo mabagal, gagapang kapag manonood ka ng mga video materials. So interaction lang, collaborative work, consultation, sasagot sa mga quizzes, ganyan. Yun yung pwede nating ibigay dito sa model na ito ng instructional delivery. And of course, the last model, which still has a face-to-face component, is wherein all the materials will be provided online. Andun yung video materials, mag-access sila sa YouTube, etc. And even the text can be downloaded from the learning management system. Note that in all these models, the face-to-face session will have to be designed strategically. Hindi natin papupuntahin sa classroom. We will not ask our students to go to school if we will just be delivering lectures to them. Na pwede naman natin gawin remotely. Diba? Pwede naman natin ibigay ito sa kanila. Kung hindi naman necessary na sila ay pumunta sa school, then let's not ask them to go to school. So ano na yung mga activities? Again, yung iba, kung laboratory classes yan, for secondary school, for higher ed, for technical vocational. Kung may mga skills na kailangan ipakita, may mga skills na kailangan i-show din yung mga estudyante na natutunan nila, assessment or examination, ganyan. Then let's ask them, especially if they don't have access to the equipment, laboratory equipment. Hindi nila magagawa yung mga laboratory exercises with just the available resources in their home and in their community. Then, puntahin natin sila if the situation will allow for it. That's why I put here the emphasis, occasional face-to-face session is still being considered under this blended mode of instruction. But of course, we are now faced with this situation wherein no face-to-face session will be allowed. So what are the options that are available to us? I have mentioned earlier, all materials are non-digital. Walang access sa computer, walang access sa internet yung mga estudyante natin. So we give all the printed materials to them. I can cite one example of a UP unit, no? Under UP ito, wherein what they provided to their students are all printed materials. Nung mag-lockdown, kasi hindi pa tapos yung semestre eh. So, they printed all materials and delivered it, yung mga instructional materials, doon sa mga bahay ng mga estudyante. So, may ganung option. Walang access sa internet eh. Hindi tayo sigurado, may access ba tayo sa computer? E di, i-deliver natin. Libro lahat yan, printed lahat yan. Mag-aaral lang sila. Of course, the other model, again, ang tinanggal lang natin dito is the face-to-face. Yun lang ang tinanggal natin dito. But the materials, the way we will be packaging the materials, the way we will be putting them together, will have to consider the kind of access to the computer and to the internet by our students. So still we can have the combination of printed video in a CD or USB or online for the academic interaction, assessment, collaborative work. Kung hindi masyadong malakas ang access sa internet, then we have the learning management system. So yun yung ibibigay natin sa kanila. And of course, the ideal situation is a purely online mode of delivery, wherein all the learning materials will be provided to the students online. So I can cite here the case of UPOU, wherein we no longer provide printed materials unless the student requests for it. Sasabihin niya, ma'am, hindi kaya, gusto ko yung printed material. So ito ay binibigay namin sa estudyante. Sabi niya, ma'am, kasi it takes time for me to download all the materials. So if I may, I would like to request for a printed material. But under ordinary circumstances or situation, all the materials, the modules, the text modules, video materials are all online and are made available by the teacher through the learning management system. And so that's why in this mode of instruction, for the last three models, a learning management system is already important because there is that implication already of the online activity of the students. So these are the options we now consider. And I think this is where we can have one of our questions through a poll. I think one question that we have was the question number 1. How do you assess the level of internet access? Yes, can we? Yeah, that one. So how for those teachers who are part of our webinar session today, can we have this with the current knowledge that we have now? How do we assess? How do we assess the level of access of our students to the internet? So pakisagot po natin. Because that kind of reflection would allow us to design our learning materials. Katulad nung sinabi ko kanina, hindi nagmamatter kung lahat ng materyales ng estudyante ay printed, wala siyang access sa online, as long as the teacher will be able to design the learning activities very well and very much aligned with the learning objectives, yun yung magmamatter. It's not the access to the internet. It's the design of the learning methods that will matter, because we will be assessing our students based on the learning objectives and not because of the process, not because of how the materials were provided to them. So this knowledge of what kind or level of internet access our students have will help us in making the combination of the format of the instructional materials that we will provide to our students. So can we proceed now? Do we have the answers now? Siguro later we can show the answer after my presentation. Is that okay? Para sa ano natin? And then I can proceed to the next slide. Okay. So ayan ang sagot natin. So no access ay 9%. Limited access, parang ito yung mas marami, ano. Very good access, talagang kukonti ito, ano. So when we say na very limited access yung mga estudyante natin, makikita natin na ito ang mga combination. Ito yung combination ng materials na ipoprovide natin kasi weak. Baka karamihan ng ating ibibigay ng mga materials sa kanila ay dapat ay magagamit nila offline. Parang ating hihingi na lang sa kanila ay academic, yung mga participation, ganyan, wherein they will be interacting with their fellow learners. Ganon. So with this knowledge, we can now design our instruction. Diba? Na ay wala pala siyang access eh. So ito na lang ito ganito natin gagawin. So keep this thing in mind, that it will really determine how we will deliver our instruction to our students. Okay, so thank you very much for that, and thank you for participating in this poll. Okay, so let's proceed. So again, these are our options. But what are our challenges? Okay, so siyempre alam natin, lagi nating naririnig, paano naman tayo mag-go-online, di ba? How can we go online? Wala ngang access sa internet. Katulad ng ipinakita kanina dun sa poll natin, ano? And of course, we don't want, as what has been shown in this picture, we don't want this to happen, na may nakasilip na ganyan, yung isa walang access, tapos pinipilit niya sumilip sa internet access nung isa, no? We don't want students, that there will be students left outside of the learning environment simply because they happen to be in the wrong side of the social structure. They are digitally excluded. We need to ensure that what is depicted in the picture in this slide will not happen, and that what we will make sure is there will be equity in access to the learning opportunities, and there will also be the equity in achieving the learning outcomes. Binigyan natin ng access, but at the same time, pinag-enroll nga natin, pero kailangan i-ensure din natin that there will be equity in achieving the learning outcomes. And we have initiatives, different initiatives to address this. I mentioned earlier the different models of flexible teaching and learning, na yung content, yung lesson, kung ano yung dapat matutunan ng mga estudyante, ay ibibigay din natin sa kanila in the format that they will be able to access and interact with. Diba? So yun yung i-consider natin. Of course, we also have heard of the different initiatives of the telcos. Smart, Globe, ganyan. And so like for instance, in one of the webinar sessions that we've had together with Smart, meron silang sinabi na they are one with us, and in some of their initiatives, they are really considering how they can also address this concern of digital divide and make more students have access to the internet. So may mga ganyan naman din silang initiative, and it's something that we also give to them. I would like to make special mention of the DICT's initiatives. Earlier, Director Tess mentioned about this program, initiatives of the ICT in terms of connecting schools. I have grabbed here some pictures from the Facebook post of Director Tess Camba and Director Cheng Ortega. I've been following this initiative of the ICT in terms of which areas had been connected to the internet, and the focus on schools or universities. I have noted that as well in the many Facebook posts that our friends, directors, the ICT directors are doing. Of course, Director Tess also mentioned making available the Tech for Ed centers, which has been providing this type of service even before. I mean, it's not something new. That our Tech for Ed centers, those who are with us in this webinar session, the Tech for Ed center managers, community center managers, of course, we know that this is something that we are already providing to our community. But I think this role is now more magnified. It's now more magnified because of this pronounced need for access to the computer and access to the internet. So, siguro ang ano natin dito is let us all rise up to the occasion and make sure that these services are really promoted in our community, because this is really how important our role is. Our Tech for Ed centers, our community centers, napaka-importante. Kung noon importante yung role natin, I think mas magiging importante, mas importante yung role natin. And as I mentioned, something that we've been doing for the past so many years, but something that we can even extend to the next higher level. These kinds of services that we are providing to the community where we are operating. So that's for the digital divide. The major challenge that we are facing now. Of course, there is this perception. It's managing perception. Alam din natin that there are many perceptions that are existing about online learning, about distance education, about online learning. So the first, there is this perception na kapag hindi na pumasok yung mga estudyante, sabi ng mga magulang, ano ba, ako na ba ang magtuturo? Ako na ba yung magtuturo? Kasi hindi na sila pumapasok sa school eh. Am I now going to assume the task or the responsibility of teaching my children? Paano ko gagawin to? Hindi naman ako trained to do this. Diba? And this is a very common thing. This is a common perception. This is a common comment na lagi kong naririnig, laging itinatanong sa akin. Meron pa ngang isa na nagtanong sa akin, bakit kaya ang taas-taas pa rin ng tuition na sisingilin ng mga eskwelahan? Lalo ngayon, di ba, nag-start na yung mga enrollment natin, lalo yung sa basic ed. Nagsimula na yung enrollment and then people are asking, parents are asking, aba, hindi na nga papasok yung aking mga anak, bakit ganun pa rin yung tuition na sinisingil sa akin, di ba? Tapos ako pa nga yung magtuturo. So how are we gonna address this? There should be the orientation from the school, from the teachers, from the school administrators. We need also to orient our different stakeholders. We have to note that even in this mode of instruction, kahit na hindi pumapasok ang ating mga anak sa eskwelahan, the teacher will still have to do the teaching. Sila yung kanina, kaya I am always emphasizing learning methods. Paano i-design yan? Mas mahirap po ang magiging trabaho ng ating mga teachers ngayon. Now that the students are not with them, how can they keep progress, keep track of the progress of the academic situation of their students? Karamihan pa nga sa mga ganyan, tatawag, di ba, kukumustahin, ganyan, just so that they will be informed. Kaya lagi ko sinasabi, parang mas maraming trabaho if the teacher will be teaching in distance mode of education, online mode, ganyan. So, at yung pong, especially those in the private school, yung pong tuition fee natin, ang pinanggagalingan ng sweldo ng mga teachers. So, ang mga schools, we just need to explain na ang pagtuturo naman po ay hindi gagawin ng mga magulang because there will still be the teacher who will design it, who will design the strategy for learning, who will be making assessment, who will be doing the teaching, who will be checking kung ano na nangyayari sa ating mga estudyante. That will still be the work of the teacher. And the parents, the guardians will still be our partners in making sure that learning will happen even if the students are not going to the classroom. The other perception that we need to manage is that perception that online learning is of lower quality. So, lagi nating naririnig yan. Kaya may resistance may resistance. Ayoko mag-online learning kasi mas mababa yung quality niyan. Of course, ang ganitong klase ng pag-iisip, this kind of perception, this kind of thinking, I always attribute it to the lack of knowledge with how teaching and learning is happening in an online mode of environment. I would always argue, and I think you will say that it's probably because I'm part of UP Open University. I will always argue that a very well-designed online learning can be better than conventional mode of instruction, especially if the teacher is not well prepared. Kung hindi maganda ang preparasyon ng guro sa pagtuturo, at kahit nakikita pa niya ang kanyang estudyante araw-araw, it will not compare to a very well-designed online learning. And I will always go and stand for that. So, it is also important that we present or we inform our stakeholders na kahit naman po online learning, meron din po kaming QA framework. Ito, very common yan in the residential instruction. This quality assurance framework. And if I am asked, how are you assuring that the kind of instruction that is happening in the online mode of instruction is quality? Then I will start the discussion with, how are you making sure that the quality of instruction in the conventional or residential mode is a quality instruction? So kapag in-outline sa akin ang mga pillars ng quality instruction sa residential, I will do the same for online learning. Pag sinabi sa akin sa residential, kailangan magagaling ang mga teacher, I will also say, in online learning, that is also the case. Hindi pwedeng bobo ang teacher sa online learning. Katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, ang technology ay tool lang. It's just a tool of the teacher. If you are not a good teacher, if you are a bad teacher, kahit napakaganda pa ng technology na ginagamit mo, hindi matatakpan ng technology yung pagiging hindi mo magaling na teacher. You know? So the qualifications of the teachers, same thing. Instructional materials. Sabi ko nga, baka nga mas mabuti pa sa online learning because instructional materials are prepared ahead of time. Content the quality of content is assured. In the residential instruction, ang lagi kong tanong sa mga universities, when we talk of quality instruction, how are we assuring that the kind of teaching that our teachers does in the classroom is of quality content? Who is checking? Who is checking that? In the online mode of instruction, in distance education, there is a process to make sure that the content, the instructional content that is being delivered, to the student is correct and quality content, updated, etc. So, same thing, instructional materials. Tinitingnan natin pareho yan so that we can say that the kind of instruction that we are delivering is quality. Of course, merong isang dagdag tayo when it comes to online. Yung infrastructure, yung technology that we are using. Diba? Sabi ko nga, yung learning management system, like in UPOU, we are using Moodle for our learning management system. The marching order is our learning management system should be 99.9% up. Hindi pwede na makakatanggap tayo ng reklamo na hindi ma-access ang ating learning management system. It cannot be. Because that is one pillar of quality in online instruction. Hindi pwedeng hindi ma-access. Hindi pwedeng hindi tayo online. Ganon. Of course, learner support, the same way that we provide support to our students in the residential instruction, ganon din po yung ginagawa natin sa online. In fact, we really design it well such that the student would feel that they are supported by the school or the university. Kahit sila ay wala sa eskwelahan. They can access library, they can access the guidance counselor, they can seek academic advising, even if they are not physically present in the university. And of course, assessment. If there is a system in the residential instruction wherein they are making sure that the integrity of the assessment process is ensured, the same thing is happening in distance education or online learning. So I think it's just a matter of explaining and orienting our different stakeholders to manage the perception that online learning is of lower quality. Yesterday, I had a very long discussion with one of the vice presidents of UP, and he was telling me that there is no way. I mean, parang ngayon we can really completely dispel the perception that online learning is of lower quality because everyone is now moving into online learning. And online learning may really be the new normal, or partly students studying online, even if if the COVID-19 pandemic would end, and online learning will already be part of how we will be teaching under the normalizing the new normal after the COVID pandemic, then there will already be the culture of online learning, and nobody would look down to online learning because everyone is already part of it, or everyone has been part of it. So may mga ganun tayong tinitingnan ngayon, especially when we say, what are we bringing in terms of normalizing the new normal? And that's after the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's the second challenge that we need to manage and we need to address. Of course, the third challenge, and I think this is which occupy our minds and our resources, our efforts at present, is the needed preparations. There's so many things that we need to prepare. Shifting to remote teaching and learning, distance education, there are many essentials that we need to consider in our strategic planning. We need to train the teachers, we need to train the staff, we need to prepare the instructional materials, as what I had emphasized earlier. We need to put in place support services. We need to prepare our students. We need to prepare our other stakeholders, as I've mentioned. So this illustration that I am showing here, so we have here the teacher, we have the institution, and there has to be that bridge so that we can reach our learners. And what are the things, or what are the components that we need to put in place so that we can bridge that physical distance between the teacher and the student? So let's take a look at them one by one. Okay, the trained teacher. Ba? So I think those teachers who are part of this webinar session, we are all familiar with Mishra and Kohler's TPCK model. the technology, pedagogy, and content knowledge model. We can say that in terms of the content knowledge, that is already given. Teachers, during their pre-service training, they are already provided with the content for the subject area that they are teaching. Even the pedagogy. Teacher ka, so alam mo na yung pedagogy. What are the theoretical underpinnings of the way we are teaching? It is also given, and we only need to apply it in the context of distance education or remote teaching. Because yun nga, this physical separation between the teacher and the learner. In the current context, the technological knowledge can be considered as the critical one, given the wide array of ICTs or the technologies which we can employ, which we can use so that we can deliver instruction or content, lesson to our students which are at a distance from us. So the familiarity with these technologies and their affordances, ano ba ang pwedeng gawin ng Zoom? Ano ba ang pwedeng gawin ng learning management system na to? Ano ang mga pwede kong gamitin? Facebook Live. We are now in Facebook Live. Many of our viewers are in Facebook Live. So as a teacher, is it something that I can also use? Diba? Ang dami na, ang dami natin pwedeng and this is accessible also to our students. So it is important that we be familiar with all these available and accessible technologies, accessible not only to us, but also to our students so that we can deliver the instructional content to them. So familiarity with the technology. The other aspect of being a trained teacher, I have mentioned this earlier, is designing and delivering instruction. Paano natin i-design itong mga to? Paano natin ipuput together? Anong learning activities ang pwede natin ipagawa? So that we can make sure that learning will happen even if the students are not with us. Dito talaga papasok lahat ng creativity, the knowledge, pedagogical knowledge ng ating mga teachers so that they can design the learning activities, designing the learning under this mode of instruction. Again, we have to always note and go back to the learning goals because that will be our guide. That will be our guide when we design all these things, the learning activities specifically, and even the assessment. So, huhugutin lahat ng kaalaman, skills, and creativity ng ating mga guro. Kaya napaka-importante ng role ng ating mga teachers dito sa ating ginagawa na shift to remote teaching and learning. Ganon. Kanina, I think, I mentioned already, even taking note or considering the instructional materials or content that are available in the internet. Sa higher education, familiar tayong lahat dun sa outcome-based education, yung OBE. Meron pa nga tayong na OBDICE, diba? So, yung ganon, tingnan natin ano yung mga outcome-based na mga goals na nakaset for our course. And that will now guide us. There's even the OBE process. It can guide us in how we will be designing the learning activities of our students who are not with us. I also would like to share with you this survey, Kamusta Ka Teacher? It was conducted by the Asia Foundation Philippines, wherein teachers said they need some help in addressing various concerns. Should their respective schools make use of various flexible learning options when classes resume? Nakalagay dito, 60% or 65% of the teachers noted that they need help in teaching strategies for distance learning. So paano ko ba ituturo ito? 62% said they need assistance in designing suitable assessment and evaluation. Paano ko i-assess kung may natutunan ba yung estudyante ko? A total of 57% also said they need help in preparing lessons and materials for distance learning. Paano ko gagawin? Ito naka-PowerPoint ako ngayon. May mga handouts ako. Paano ko ito i-prepare kapag naka-remote teaching na ako? 55% said that they need assistance in reproduction of materials for distance learning. I think this is something that the school can provide. 54% also need help in collecting the students' works and monitoring submissions. Again, this is the reason why we said that in distance education, there has to be the institutional support because the teacher cannot do it alone. So the support would come not only for the students, but also for the teachers who are venturing into this mode of instruction probably for the first time. Kaya napaka-importante ng role and understanding of the university or school officials in all these planning and preparations that we need to do before the school opens in August or September. 42% said they need assistance in looking for teacher resources. Paano bang gagawin ko dito? Sanay ako na ito lang ang aking mga resources. Are there other resources which I can use in my teaching? I think I have also a question here. Tama ba na no, I think that's question number 3, which I think we can ano na lang later. In terms of what for the teachers who are with us in this webinar session, you can also assess what aspect of teaching will you be needing assistance. We can probably administer that later. So I will just proceed. Ito na pala, sige, ito. So the question is, which among the following would you be needing assistance as you prepare to transition to distance or remote teaching and learning? So we have 4 options here. Preparation of instructional materials, use of technology for teaching, knowing where to get learning content or resources, or in designing assessment in distance or remote teaching mode of instruction. So those teachers who are with us, please note, saan dito kayo mas nangangailangan ng tulong? Because it will also guide us. Although if you have noted during the early part of this session, we have already identified topics for the succeeding webinar session because in our perception, in our thoughts, yun yung mga kakailanganin noong ating mga teachers, noong ating mga eskwelahan, in preparing for the next opening of classes or the opening of classes in the next school year. So yun ay base doon sa mga unang pag-aaral ngayon. So dito, tingnan natin, among our participants in this webinar session, alin dito sa mga ito ang mas nangangailangan kayo ng tulong? Okay, so sige po. Hintayin natin yung inyong kasagutan. Okay. So we are also taking note of your responses para din halimbawa kung may kailangan pa na hindi kasama doon sa mga pinlano natin na webinar session, baka pwede nating isama doon sa mga kung saan may pinakamalapit na topic, yung tungkol doon sa ma-identify natin na kailangan noong ating mga webinar participants. Okay, titingnan natin kung anong resulta ng ating poll. Ang sabi dito, designing assessment. It's not surprising. Designing assessment in distance remote teaching and mode of instruction. Meron po tayong webinar session specifically on assessment. So medyo sinagot na natin yun. Those who said na mangangailangan ng assistance in designing assessment, make sure po that you will register dun sa webinar session natin on assessment. Ito lang po yung ating magiging discussion dun sa topic na yon. Designing assessment, giving feedback, how are we gonna ensure the integrity of the exam process, lahat po yon. Preparations of instructional materials, I will have to check that kung ito ay madi-discuss in one of the sessions. The use of technology, I think there is one for the technology, specifically the learning management system and other technologies which you can use for synchronous and asynchronous session. When learning where to get the resources, meron din pong special session on that. It's about learning resources, and the discussion will also include the open educational resources. So you will also be directed to the different repositories of open educational resources, which will include the one that UPOU has, the networks, that upou.edu.ph, as well as the TVUP. So yung po mga nagtuturo, pwede nyo pong puntahan yung mga yon, but there will be deeper discussion on where to source the learning resources for our teaching and learning. Okay, so maraming salamat sa pagsagot, and we have noted your responses and the assistance or help that you are most in need of. So let's close that and let's proceed. Okay, so the other thing that we need to prepare are our students, especially when we talk of at the basic ed. Di ba parang hirap ipaliwanag dun sa mga bata na bakit hindi ako papasok? I mean, especially during this time, kung hindi pa nagsisimula yung mga pasukan sa basic ed, yung iba naghahanda na. Nakapamili na ng mga bag, ng mga sapatos, nagko-cover na tayo ngayon ng mga libro, ng mga notebook, etc. Ang mga uniform nakahanda na. So it's also necessary for us to explain why are we not in that mode of preparation. Instead, ano yung mga preparation na ginagawa natin? Those who are probably with enough resources are now looking at saan ba ako makakabili ng medyo mura na laptop. Wala akong internet. Paano ba gagawin natin? Ganyan. O, siyempre, yung may mga resources, magpapakabit ng internet, ganyan, or mamimili ng mga data natin. So, it's important that we prepare our students emotionally, psychologically. Hindi na nila makikita yung mga kaibigan nila. Baka next year na nila makikita. Mag-usap na lang sila online. Baka that's something that we also need to introduce to them. And then, of course, the technological skills. It's not, we will not be surprised kung marunong naman silang gumamit ng mga gadget. But we have to reorient them in such a way that the use of the gadget now is for learning. Diba? Kailangan ito ng paggamit mo ng gadget. Kung mag-YouTube ka man, ang papanoorin mo ay yung lesson mo sa YouTube. So we have to have that kind of reorientation as well. Especially again, doon sa mga bata, yung mga nasa basic ed. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, that I saw in a TV interview, yung ating kaibigan si Melissa Tan. They are using TikTok to reach yung ating young people natin. To also address this somehow may feeling of isolation Hindi nga makalabas ng bahay. Hindi katulad ng dati na they are so free to, especially mga teenagers natin, ganyan. So we noted that the different organizations are also trying to address the situation. So like for instance, the use of a very popular platform like TikTok sa mga kabataan natin, bakit hindi natin i-reorient yung paggamit ng TikTok so that we can address whatever problems, emotional, psychological, na nararanasan ng ating mga kabataan ngayon, they can express themselves through the platform and somehow address these specific problems that they are experiencing right now. So we need to prepare our students, we need to prepare the teachers, we need to prepare the materials as well as the support system that we need to provide to our students. I have mentioned the bridge. I have shown this picture earlier. And the bridge would comprise, of course, the technologies for teaching and learning. Marami na sa atin ang gumagamit ng Zoom. We can use this if it is necessary for us to give synchronous lectures. What is good about Zoom is that it is automatically recorded. So pwede, kung hindi nakaparticipate, hindi nakapakinig ang estudyante natin, pwede natin ibigay, make available to them the video recording. And they can still listen to us doing the lecture. So in a way, walang nawala sa kanila. Diba? Walang nawala. Kasi napakinggan pa rin nila tayo na nagle-lecture. So what other technologies? I have mentioned learning management system. I have mentioned Facebook. There's the email. There's the Google Classroom as our learning management system. Marami. Of course, let's not forget the very common mobile phone. Pwede tayong mag-text, pwede tayong tumawag sa mga estudyante natin. Kahit yung simpleng kumustahan. Many schools are now doing that. Yung pinaplano nila yung kumustahan na yan, wherein school staff will be calling the students one by one, even the parents, just so they can monitor the academic progress of their students. I have mentioned instructional materials, the learning package. I would like to introduce here two more terms, the course guide, the study guide. Kasi nga, we have to provide the information to our students. Wala sila sa atin, di natin sila kasama. And chances are, there will be questions tungkol sa klase, tungkol sa lesson, paano ako mag-aaral, ano ang mga assignments ko, kailan ako mag-i-exam. Those questions and those information will have to be provided to the students. So sa UPOU, we usually have this course guide, which is the general document given to the student. Alam niya kung ano yung kursong in-enroll niya, ano yung mga dapat niyang pag-aralan, saan niya i-access ang kanyang teacher, paano niya i-access yung teacher niya, kailan mag-i-end ang klase, kailan siya mag-i-exam, ano-ano ang mga assignments niya. So ganun. And then a study guide, yung lesson. Kung nagbigay ka sa kanya ng libro, paano ko pag-aaralan yung libro? Diba? So halimbawa, kung ang lesson natin ngayon, week 1, schedule, it's also very important that we provide that kind of information to our students. Week 1 ng klase. Oh, kailangan basic chapter 1 itong libro na to pag-aralan mo. Ito yung schedule natin. And then after that, ito yung gagawin mo. So yun yung tinatawag na study guide. Specific to the lesson and specific to the learning activity, specific to the schedule noong pag-aaral. So ganoong kadetalye ang kailangan i-provide natin na information sa ating mga estudyante. And of course, I have mentioned about the learner support system. Very, very important. Kung saan makakakuha ng suporta yung ating mga estudyante. Lalo ngayon, di ba, medyo may mga problema tayo ngayon sa depression, ganyan. So, in the same way, paano natin ito ipoprovide sa ating mga estudyante? It's kasi lalo ngayon na may feeling of isolation yung ating mga mag-aaral. Kailangan, sabi nga nung isang eskwelahan na narinig ko nagpapaliwanag how they are preparing, sabi niya, ang in-strengthen nila is the guidance counseling. Sabi niya ganon. Kasi in-anticipate nila na yung mga estudyante will have this feeling of isolation at kailangan nila immediately ma-address yun. So may mga ganong preparasyon ang iba't ibang eskwelahan natin. So we call that the learner for the learner support system. Okay, so some tips for our teachers. Kasi alam natin na for many of our teachers, this will be your first journey to moving to online teaching or distance education, remote teaching and learning, if you may want to call it that way. So these are the some of the tips. Set realistic expectations. First time natin gagawin to, even us at UPOU, when we did this online teaching for the first time, nangangapa kami. And ang nangyari sa amin noon, nakikipag-usap kami sa mga kapwa namin teachers na may ganito akong problem, may yung estudyante ko ganito. So we share yung mga experiences namin, and from there nakakabuo kami na baka magandang strategy ito. But our expectations are realistic, especially at that time that we were just starting. We cannot set perfection as our standard. Siguro later gawin natin yon. But right now we have to be realistic. Halimbawa, hindi naman tayo mga professional, yung lalo yung ganitong type ng lecture, hindi tayo sanay sa ganito eh. Mas sanay tayo, nakaharap natin yung mga estudyante natin nagle-lecture. Then all of a sudden, ang kaharap mo camera. All of a sudden, ang kaharap mo monitor ng laptop mo. Ganon. So, hindi tayo mga artista. Lagi kong sinasabi. Hindi tayo mga artista na sanay humarap sa camera. Ganon. So, but it takes time to practice. Nung una, medyo mako-conscious ka pa, ano ba to, bakit camera yung kaharap ko, ganyan. It takes time to practice, and somehow at the initial stage, we should just be practical about the expectations. The important thing is we deliver the instructional content in the way we design them to be. So again, given that our students are not with us, we communicate clearly with them. I have mentioned this already, that there should be documents which will contain the kind of information that we want to give to our students. We need to anticipate the questions that they will be asking. Nagturo naman tayo sa, ang malaking karanasan natin, the bigger chunk of our experience is teaching in the classroom. And even in the classroom, our students are asking questions. If they are not with us, what kind of questions would they be asking? Diba? So mga tanong naman, ma'am, kailan po ang deadline ng submission nitong assignment na to? Madali nating sagutin if it's in the classroom setting. But if it's remote, they are not with us, kailangan nandun na. Assignment number 1 is this. Deadline is this. Submit through this. Kailangan clear lahat ng yon. Examination is on this schedule. Paano ko kukuhanin yung examination? Pupunta ba ako sa school? Online ba to? May proctor ba ako? May pupunta ba sa akin para mag-proctor? It has to be clear. All these things must be clear and must be contained in a document which the student, or kung mga bata yung mga yan, the guardians can read so that they can guide the students on how they will go about the learning process and the other learning activities that we will make or design for them. So I also put here, in designing, in putting together all our materials, in designing the learning of our students, we should keep in mind the learning objectives. Let us ask ourselves, what are the most important things that our students should learn from our course? Pagka kasi online, halimbawa pag online, minsan na nagiging tendency ng mga teachers, since online nga, tinatambakan ng napakaraming activities yung mga estudyante. Ganyan. So, kahit kami, nagkaroon din kami ng ganyang tendency when UPOU was starting to go online. Na parang ang dali-daling magbigay ng mga activities sa mga estudyante, but we were warned na hindi dapat ganon. Ito bang mga activities na ibinibigay natin, are they essential so that the students will achieve the learning objectives that we have set for the course, or will they just be busy work? Ano ba yan? Essential ba yan or busy work lang yan? Ganyan. But we have to note that sometimes we have to give some busy and fun work to our students so we can keep them engaged. So, lagyan natin ng balanse. Learning objectives, busy fun work, so that we can keep them engaged. We can make the learning experience for them a better one. Yung mag-i-enjoy sila, yung tipo na pagising nila ng umaga, isipin nila, ay, i-open ko yung course site ko. Diba? I-open ko yung course site ko kasi masaya dun sa course site ko, may mga ginagawa kaming ganito, makaka-interact ako yung mga kaklase ko, magsasagutan kami sa discussion forum, ganyan. So make the learning experience fun for our students, enjoyable to our students, at the same time keeping in mind what they should be learning. So there has to be the balance for that. The underlying factor here is we need to keep our students engaged para hindi sila mawala sa klase natin. Sila mag-drop, ganyan, and we can assure them towards the completion of the course. Hanggang sa end ng semestre o end ng school year. So ganun may ganung role yung teacher. Kaya talaga mahirap yung online eh. So, on the part of the teacher, kasi we have to be very sensitive doon sa general sentiment or general feeling of our students. Kailangan nararamdaman natin na uy, parang ano yata yung mga estudyante, hindi yata sila nagpa-participate, di ba? So kailangan we are very sensitive to the general sentiment and the environment nung ating online class. So test your content and technology early. Ito yung sinasabi namin, that's why it's also important na tayo as teacher, we know the technology that we will be using. Halimbawa ako, if I am invited to a webinar session, ang unang tanong ko, anong platform ang gagamitin natin? If the platform is something that is not familiar to me, medyo pinaghahandaan ko yon. Kasi that also happened to me, na hindi ako familiar dun sa platform. So nagkaroon kami ng parang 2 o 3 beses kami nag-technical rehearsal just so that I can be familiar with the different features of the platform. And then of course, consider how the transition will open to new opportunities. We are not preparing this just for 2 or 3 months, 1 school year. What we are doing now can bring us to the new opportunities which can be our direction as we go through all these preparations that we are doing now. So this is the direction. I just put here one. And that is this opportunity, the things that we are doing now is an opportunity for us to redefine the learning process that is happening in the classroom and transform the conventional mode of instruction through the use of modern information and communication technology. So ngayon, kung noon ang classroom natin ay ganito, what are the new things, the good practices that we are doing now, that we are integrating into the way that we are teaching now, which we can bring back once bumalik na tayo dun sa classroom instruction natin. So I just put here this model, SAMR model, wherein there is the substitution. Gumagamit tayo ng ganito, and this is very common na. I mean, many of us, I think, is using this already or are using this already, the substitution of technology to the way we do our classroom instruction. Augmentation, meron tayong lecture, at the same time, meron tayong mga paggamit ng technology sa classroom. But when we reach that point of modification, iniiba na natin ang the way we are teaching with the use of technology. Gumagamit na tayo ng mga open educational resources, computer-assisted instruction, gumagamit tayo ng learning management system, etc., etc. Then there is already the process of transforming our classroom instruction. And this is something that I hope we can always remember as we continue this process of preparing and integrating many technology or tools to the way we will be doing the teaching in the next academic year. So dadalhin ulit natin ito pabalik doon sa classroom natin. And in doing so, we will now be redefining and will be transforming our mode of instruction in the classroom, and which will make the learning process easier or even be facilitated in the classroom teaching that we will be doing. So hindi lang ito preparasyon. It's not just a preparation because of COVID. Let us also look at what we are doing now as a preparation even post-COVID. Kahit matapos na yung pandemic, ito yung ibabalik natin. And something that we will do. Something that we have learned, something that we will integrate so that we can redefine and transform our classroom instruction. So I have put here some data just to show the prospects of online learning in the Philippines. Of course, we are all familiar with this, the number of internet users, the share of internet users across age group. Kung makikita natin, nasaan ba? Kasi it will also validate yung mga claim about the digital divide. So, titingnan natin, nasaan tayo, nasaan mga edad yung may mga access sa computer sa Pilipinas. And that this will also guide us in terms of our preparation during this time of pandemic and even after the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so again, some data. time spent online. I'm sure we are all familiar with this. But this again will somehow help us in terms of looking what will be the future of online learning or the prospect of online learning in our country. Okay. I also would like, at this point, I would like to give you this two references which I use in my presentation, and which you can also access even after our session today. These are open access materials. You can download them, you can search them, you can Google them, and access them, download them for free, and learn also, because there are so many things that were discussed in these two reference materials, and I was able to just get the surface of the discussion. But there are many examples na pwede tayong matuto on how this transition to remote teaching and learning was done in other countries. So matututo rin tayo from their experiences. And I think as my last slide, I also would like to direct you to some of the websites. So first is the website of UPOU, where we announce all our other initiatives. This partnership with the ICT is just one initiative that we are doing now in our response, our fight against COVID-19. All these initiatives, we put them under one umbrella program. We call it #OpenFight against COVID. So maraming ginagawa ngayon ng UPOU, even online, free online training for teachers. We've been doing that, and you can get information from our website. That's www.upou.edu.ph. Networks.upou.edu.ph is our repository of open educational resources. I have mentioned this earlier, and kung mga nangangailangan kayo ng mga resources for your teaching, pwede niyong puntahan ito, and there are open access materials dito sa even the webinar sessions, recording of the webinar sessions that we've been doing can be accessed through this site. And the last is model.upou.edu.ph. This is the platform which we are using for our free online courses. So those who are interested na mag-avail or mag-participate in our free online courses, pumunta lang po kayo dito sa platform na to, and then piliin ninyo kung ano yung mga courses na gusto niyo. Again, libre po itong mga kurso na to. So with that, maraming salamat po, at kung may mga katanungan po kayo, I will also try to answer them. Maraming salamat. Thank you. Actually, pwede mong ganon. Kasi you want, especially kung sa basic, basic ed, ginagawa natin ng structure. Merong flow, kasi ang natin is it will build on each other. So, ito yung simula, and then we will be getting complex. So, as much as possible, ginagawan din natin ng ganon, na may structure, may flow, may sequence. Pero ini-encourage din natin, especially kung higher ed na yan, ini-encourage din natin na, kasi nga online na ito may mga hyperlinks na tayo. And some of our students may not study that way. Baka gusto nila ito muna yung pag-aralan nila, ito muna. So the challenge for the teacher is to make sure that the lessons are interconnected. Kung magsimula man siya sa gitna, magsimula man siya dito, ito muna ang babasahin ko, ma-relate through the learning activities, ma-relate niya sa bawat isa, and it will also direct the student towards achieving the learning goal. So pwedeng ganon. Depende kung anong level yung pinagtuturuan mo. Ang natin dito, anong gagawin ng mga estudyante kung hindi sila mag-online? 'Di ba? I think what option do we have now? If the parents do not want online learning, what is their suggestion? What is the option that they will give to their to the activities? Ano ang gagawin ng mga anak nila kung hindi sila papasok? 'Di ba? Ako, right from the start, ako sa mga apo ko, sa simula pa lang, even without the announcement from DepEd, I said, it has to be online. They will not go to school. So simula pa lang, wala pang announcement yan na may decision na kaagad kami because we know the danger. We know the danger. And online learning is better than doing nothing at all. That's my stand. And we need to explain that to the parents. May mga measures po tayo para magawa natin ito. Of course, it will help yung mga practices natin sa assessment when we talk of validity and reliability. Ang titingnan lang po natin, ito bang assessment na ginagawa natin sa classroom, would they still be applicable or relevant given the online setting? So yun po yung natin. Again, bigger, deeper discussion will be done during the webinar session on assessment. So maraming salamat po. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. We are DICT MC1 World Champion at World Summit on Information Society Prizes 2020 by International Telecommunications Union. We wish you a safe and blessed week. Please stay negative. Bye po.